Okay. Hi, everyone. We might as well get started. Welcome again to our Alumni Speaker Series. We've had a lot of great events so far this year, and this one is going to be no exception to that. It's a really good panel today. We're going to be talking about the law of data and cybersecurity, and we're just really happy to have all of our guest panelists here, and we're especially happy to have Professor John Weinberg moderating this panel. Most of you know Professor Weinberg, but for those of you who don't know him well, he's been a professor here at the law school since 1988. But prior to that, he also was a Supreme Court clerk for Justice Thurgood Marshall. He was also a judicial clerk for Ruth Bader Ginsburg when she was in the Court of Appeals. And he's done a lot of work on issues related to the internet and high technology law and policy. And so he's the perfect person to moderate our panel today. I'm going to turn it over to Professor Weinberg to take it from there.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's actually a more elaborate introduction than my plans on giving the panelists, so I have to rethink that. One of the things that's wonderful about the Alumni Speaker Series from the perspective of a faculty member is that you get to see people who were your students back in the day come back, and now they're leaders in the field, which is just completely awesome. And it is not the case that all of the people on this panel were my students, because among other things, I'm not that old. I'm old, but I'm not that old.
Thanks.
But but nonetheless somewhere, and that's just amazing. Other thing that immediately comes to mind for me is that when I started teaching in this law school, Natch, data and cybersecurity was not a practice field. The internet law was not a practice field. Wayne Law was actually one of the first law schools in the country to offer a course offering an internet law. And that came when we first offered the seminar on the law in cyberspace back in the 1994-1995 academic year. And we've built on that since then. And we've got this tremendous alumni group. So they're here today to tell you what they do. And I'm just gonna go down here from my left to my right. We've got Colin Battersby here. He's a principal in the litigation and dispute resolution group at Miller Canfield, but in particular, he's co-leader of that firm's cybersecurity and data privacy team. And so he's got the real focus on cybersecurity and data privacy in his work. We've got Michael Hindelang here from Honigman. And Michael is, in general, a leading commercial litigator, but in particular, for our purposes, his practice involves advising clients on data security issues, including investigating and responding to data breach, data loss, and other cybersecurity issues. And he, like the rest of our panel, is just amazing. We've got Shivangee Pandya here, who works with Creative Many Michigan as Director of LC Services and works as a staff attorney with Lakeshore Legal Aid, and has in her practice had to deal with data security for social media and what are the issues that the lawyer needs to deal with there. We've got here Carol Romej from Hall Render, where about half of her practice is indeed data breach work. And actually I had something further on that. I misplaced it, but she'll tell you. And finally, we've got Michael Khoury here. He's a partner with FisherBroyles. He's been working with data privacy and security matters for over 20 years now. Michael is not only a past chair of the State Bar of Michigan Business Law Section and the Info Technology Law Section, but he was also one of the founding members of the Cyberspace Law Committee for the ABA Business Law Section. And so I'm just tremendously excited to hear what all of these folks are going to be telling us, but so maybe for each of you, if you could just say a little about what it is that you do, for the benefit of all these people out there, and how you got there. Colin.
I guess starting with how I got there is easier. I've been in litigation for my entire career. A couple of years ago, got involved in data breaches by happenstance because one of our clients had a data breach, got whacked with a class action lawsuit. I guess didn't have enough good sense to go find someone with a data breach background litigating that, came to us. So we got up to speed on that pretty quickly and have done the litigation on that. Piqued my interest. It's an obvious growth area, obviously very interesting area, and so I started looking more into the front end aspect of data security, dealing with policies, procedures, and best practices, and advising on those sorts of issues with clients. Developing plans and dealing with incident response when the breach happened, getting in there and doing what needs to be done to respond. So from there, I sort of became one of the people in my firm who's go-to on that, and there's a lot of need within a large firm. All the clients that we have, it's sort of an in-house, client base in a sense. Been fielding calls and the like, and so we did recently, within this last year, finally formalized a cybersecurity team, which myself and another partner in Chicago are heading up. So we're newly formalized, not so much newly practicing, but that's how we've gotten to be where we are now.
Good afternoon, I'm Mike Hindelang, and about half my time is spent on data security and privacy. The other half is general commercial litigation. And how I got there is about 10 years ago, the federal rules were being amended to deal with e-discovery. And as I got involved with what that meant, I became the head of our e-discovery and information management practice. And then as data security and privacy became increasing concerns, I became the head of, launched that practice as well a few years ago. So within the data security and privacy world, much like what Colin described, I do investigations, responses to data breach, technology-related litigation that arises out of data security incidents, and counseling of clients on policy development, writing policies, and integrating policies from a privacy perspective, records management perspective, and security perspective, so that everyone is really rowing in the same direction. And so there's the front-end piece with policy development, then the investigation and litigation piece on the back end.
I'm Shivangee Pandya. I was actually really surprised when I got an email asking me about would I be willing to speak on this panel. The work I do through Creative Many, through Lakeshore Legal Aid is not necessarily related to data privacy, but somehow starting in law school, I all of a sudden was literally thrust into this role of you need to take care of all our social media sites, and there was absolutely, that was it. That was the no follow-up, no guidance, just deal with it. So when I started in law school, and my second and third year, I worked at the small business clinic, and I also worked at the Michigan Unemployment Project. I worked at a variety of places, and through those places I set up and ran the social medias. Oftentimes I would make errors because I didn't know what I was allowed to post and not allowed to post, and realistically, the way I sort of came to learn about it is just researching, going through different social media sites, learning on how to use it, and really, and it's hard for me to really speak well on this subject because it's something I just do now. I don't do it through Lakeshore Legal Aid. I actually work on the social media for the Arts, Communication, Entertainment section of the bar, and I'm their historian now. I'm really excited that you guys are all here to listen to what this new and evolving world is about, because I can imagine that at least 50 to 85% of you have a social media site of some sort. And as you guys grow into your own practices, you're going to want to know how to use those and how to use them effectively and appropriately. So you're, of course, safeguarding your clients and safeguarding yourself.
Well, I'm Carol Romej, and I'm going to start off with something pretty radical. Invited me. I never wanted to be a lawyer. I was doing fine being a computer programmer. And worked for a major CPA firm. And lawyers started hiring me to write their deposition questions, and then I'd get their transcripts, and I'd actually have to grade them. Much like you. And then I realized, actually my direct report was getting pretty perturbed that I wasn't available for him for billable hours, the magic word applies to CPA firms as well as law firms. And yet I was fully billable, but not for him. And it became a burgeoning practice. And I'm old, so he's still nobody's back. And I was doing systems integration programming at this firm. And he says, you know what, Carol, don't take the CPAs, go to law school. So I did. And as an older student, I had 12 years of doing programming for switches and routers, some assembly of little chips that get burnt into everything that you understand what the internet is today. What happened from there is stuff that just sort of steamrolled, because I didn't understand how the system really worked. But my first employer, Ford Motor Company, made sure that I would move quickly doing electronic discovery and getting involved immediately in the early stages with the Sedona Conference, which was the precursor, the developer of the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure with respect to electronic discovery and data at rest and data in transit and what lawyers' obligations are in their litigation cases. So then from there I became general counsel of an internet backbone, and then was picked up by another major law firm shortly thereafter when that was sold. Proceeded now to my second rest at a law firm. So the practice is filling the gap. It's never moved away from my direct report at that CPA firm, where he says, Carol, there's a market gap. There's some gap with lawyers and actual issues happening for the common person and corporation. There's a technology gap, an understanding of technology. And what's amazing is I have progressed to my to my practice today, is the gap still exists. I realize that's a harsh thing to say. There are a lot of lawyers, I do a lot of data breaches, that's half my practice. All throughout, if you see my bio, my firm has offices in Anchorage, Alaska, and Seattle, and Philadelphia. We're everywhere, North Carolina. I'm missing many other cities. I personally spend a lot of time in Seattle and New York, which is very bad for my health, for traveling back and forth and timing meetings and a lot of overnight flights. But data breaches are very quick work, generally coming from clients who have real estate lawyers trying to manage it and then realize they're over their head, and then I have an overnight flight to get some more. So that's my life. It's very, very stressful. The only thing that's helpful, and Colin is very kind to say, it is stressful, but I'm passionate about what I do. I still feel this gap exists. I remember I wrote, I don't know if law school application, Professor correctly, still have that little essay you write on?
They do.
And so my essay, yeah, thank you, all right. My essay was about the gap, the technology gap, and what can happen to attorneys who are misrepresenting, even unbeknownst to them and their clients, because they're missing steps, they're missing any kind of acceleration or closing the timeline, which is my MO today. So I do a lot of, I compress the timeline. By the time you hire Price Waterhouse and 12 consultants to come in to analyze the data, because I used to do it for a living, as soon as I interview clients, I can make a very quick assessment. If an additional engineer is needed, what kind of engineer, and if I don't actually just do it myself because we're out of time. But so with that, half my work is data breach response, which means a lot of traveling. Half my work still applies to all the stuff featured. If you're fans of the Sedona Conference, I'm available for you to discuss later, which expedites electronic discovery and shows some respect for data and litigation that is at rest, in transit, and how it changes during the course of the case. And then I spend a lot of time in my restful time, which is writing technology agreements which heal those wounds and protect my clients from what happens if data is at rest, data is in transit, data is being transformed during the particular deal.
As you heard, everybody's come at this in a different way. I mentioned to Professor Weinberg that when I started practicing, so most of you probably weren't even born in 1982. But, so if you think about the fall of 1981, it was economically like the fall of 2008. You know, there had been a huge crash. I always expected that I wanted to do corporate securities work. During law school, I actually worked in a couple of firms, and the only thing close to corporate work was bankruptcy work. So I wound up becoming a bankruptcy specialist. So when I was graduating from law school, I said, okay, well, I'm not going to get a corporate securities job. So I got hired by one of the larger firms to start their bankruptcy practice. And so I did that for about 18 years. But early on in that part, I always still did commercial work. I started getting involved in technology contracts. In the early days, they referred to it as computer law as opposed to IT, because the term IT hadn't really been invented yet. But working on technology contracts was something I had been doing. And I approached a lot of it from the academic side, not academic as in law school, but academic as in the bar. I worked both with the ABA Business Law section, and I was on the council of the ABA Science and Technology Law section, where issues of technology contracts and privacy and security were all being developed. And the nice thing about doing it in the late 80s is there was no law, so we got to make things up as we went. It was actually really cool. But by the late 80s, early 90s, the issues of movement of data and contracting and how all that started, people started to think about this. And so people were actually looking at it. From my perspective, one of the things I did a lot of were sourcing transactions, outsourcing, business process outsourcing. And probably the biggest shift that happened in my practice was in 1995, when the European Union handed down a data privacy directive that actually involved the movement of data and what was restricted. And it made a lot of things that people were doing completely illegal. And so started having to deal with that on the movement of data. Eventually, the U.S. started doing some things, although what the U.S. does from a legal infrastructure side on privacy and security is minimal compared to most of the other countries. We do it on a silo basis. We don't do it on a comprehensive approach like the EU or Canada or Australia or Singapore have done. But we deal with financial services and healthcare and some other things. So people have come at this in a different approach. I wound up getting into the IT side because, like Carol, I had done computer programming. Unlike Carol, I only did it for fun. She's one of the people that actually is probably the best technical people in this area that I know of in the country. And so we each bring different kinds of approaches. I bring the approach as the business lawyer as opposed to the litigator. But we all wind up getting involved in different aspects, whether it's incident response, data breach, proactive planning, doing those kinds of things. Every once in a while, we're on the other side of the table. Carol and I were involved in a matter not too long ago where she was shocked to find out that I wasn't brought in a data breach matter until 3 weeks after the company had actually already found out. And she wanted to yell at me, but she didn't do it in front of everybody. But she should have yelled, because something like a data breach matter needs to happen. It needs attention right away. Privacy, movement of personal information, security, that can be a little bit more proactive. You can plan for those things a little bit more. But my practice kind of is everything from helping companies develop policies to dealing with incident response to deal with things. And like Professor Weinberg, I have a student, former student in the audience as well. I see.
Thank you. Thank you to all of you. That's great. When I was introducing you guys before, I forgot to mention actually that the seminar on the law in cyberspace that we first offered in 94-95, we will be indeed offering again this coming winter, which I say just as winter term registration starts a week from today, so there you go. I wanted to ask you folks, because it doesn't appear that anybody at this end of the room got into the privacy and data security field by saying, gee, what I really want to do in life is I want to be an internet lawyer. People found their way to this field in different ways. A lot of that was seizing opportunities as they presented themselves, filling the gap, as Carol described it. But I guess the first question I want to ask you guys, and this isn't one to just sort of go bump down the line, but just answer to the extent you have thoughts here. To the extent that there are folks in the audience here who really do have the plan that they want to be internet lawyers, what would you tell them to do? Besides taking my seminar, what else would you tell them to do?
Well, I'm a fan of, because I actually speak a lot in this area when I'm not flying around, and if I can actually show up, that's just worked out. Is I recommend in the middle of everything else that you have going, especially for those of you that are, well before the bar exam, I recommend just to keep your eyes wide open, to show some true respect for data at rest, data in transit, data moving, to go to, even if it's overnight, online or an evening class at a community college on network architecture. Maybe even take an introduction to programming, actually see what those steps are and what it works like, because you'll be surprised 10 years later, 5 years later, you'll be getting ready for a case or a deposition. And what you're going to learn there is going to help you frame more accurately your questions, and you will more accurately respond because you'll have a deeper understanding of what's happening in the case. So that's the thing that I offer. I actually tell a lot of lawyers to do it, especially in-house that are technology companies, and it seems to have worked out very well.
When you talk about that, recognize that the internet didn't get invented until I had been out for 10 years. I actually remember being at a cyberspace meeting where somebody pulled out a laptop and plugged his computer into a jack in the wall, and you heard the modem fire up, and he showed us what was the first version of Mosaic, which was the very first browser, which then got built into Internet Explorer and things like that. And people started saying, what is this? And it was before the term internet had even been coined. So, from the standpoint of understanding the history, it's interesting. People come at different approaches. And one of the things that I recommend is, if you're interested in this area, there are very few places that will give you the opportunity to do it full-time if you're planning on staying in Michigan. So you have to have another aspect of your practice that you're interested in. And either approach it from a business side or a litigation side or an IP side or something. Because I think the more rounded you are as a lawyer, the better you can approach these issues. But I agree with Carol that understanding how data moves. I mean, when people talk about data at rest, data movement, sometimes people their eyes glaze over because they have no clue what you're talking about. But it's a real critical issue.
So I will just say, as someone who is a more recent lawyer, a newer lawyer, and my practice and my field are still evolving, I will say to you guys something that I'm still learning is, don't say no to an opportunity, even if you don't think it's directly related. If it's even kind of in that wheelhouse, just jump in. I wouldn't be where I was today if I said, no, that sounds like too much, or that doesn't necessarily sound like what I want to do. You will get to the weirdest and best places by just saying, yeah, I'm gonna try it. You might not know about it, but there's always someone I can say, I know I can email people who are experts in the field, and every time I do, I get this amazing response with all this information. People are willing to help you, just say yes, dive in to those opportunities that your first instinct is like, no, that sounds like too much.
I'd advocate a variation on what Carol suggested. Learn the terminology. Even if you don't have the full in-depth understanding of the underlying technology, there is a great gap between IT, business, and lawyers. And I have been engaged before. A client was trying to buy a data management system. IT had one version, they insisted it was right, legal had another, they insisted it was right, and it was really just getting everyone to understand they were talking past one another because they live in a different world. And if you are able to facilitate that conversation, hear what the IT experts are saying, hear, you know what the legal aspects are, and translate it to the business decision makers, here's what this means, here's how it affects your business, here's what the decision is that you need to make. You can provide an incredible value because frequently the knowledge is out there, but it can't get to the places it needs to go. So if you're able to fill that gap, then you are providing an incredible service and you will be very busy. So I would advocate learn how to talk tech, learn how to talk business, and don't forget how to talk lawyer, because they're all going to be necessary.
Know that you can't dabble in this really. It's a constantly evolving field. I always have a stack of stuff on my desk that I'm intending to read to keep up on things, and I get through most of it, but not maybe as quickly as I'd like. I think that like anything you're going to specialize in, you have to be willing to do a deep dive in it and stay up on it, and keep your eye on that, and be willing to put in the work to make sure that you're up on the newest developments, the newest legislative trends, the newest autonomous vehicle cybersecurity protocols that came out, and stay on top of that. You got technology is ever expanding, ever growing, and you don't want to be talking about already repealed or already moved on beyond regulations and the like. So keep that in mind. In this town, I think autonomous vehicles, Internet of Things is going to be a big deal. Keep your eye on that prize and see if maybe you can be at the speed on that, but it's going to be in demand, as will everything. I mean, the other areas where data and cybersecurity are issues now are not going away. You can see obvious trends where we're going with some of this stuff. So keep your eye on that as well, and make yourself expert in a certain area, and make yourself very valuable.
Jonathan, can I supplement one thing?
Please.
So part of, and this is from Michael and Colin's comments, it reminded me that one of the things that you can do as law students or as young lawyers to start paying attention to learn about this is to follow the activities that are going on. Now, you heard from my bio that I'm a little bit of a bar junkie, different kinds of bars, actually those bars too. But there's a couple things that you can do as law students that I think would be worthwhile. You've heard mentioned the Cyberspace Law Committee in the ABA Business Law section. Professor Rothschild and I would see each other at various meetings on that. And if you're an ABA Law Student Division member, then you can join relatively cheap. You can join the Business Law section relatively cheap. And all you have to do is to say, I want to be on the Cyberspace Law Committee list. You don't even have to go to any of the meetings, although you can. And you get a monthly newsletter of articles and developments and thought processes and planning that is just an amazing, it's an amazing set of literature, it's an amazing set of ideas. At the local level, in the State Bar Information Technology Law section, there is a privacy committee that's very active, and all you have to do is become a student member of the State Bar of Michigan, and then the IT law section, and you can join that. You don't even have to go to the meetings. You can actually participate in the meeting by by phone, although going to the meetings and actually meeting the people that do this is worthwhile. So there's a lot going on. You can't stay insulated within the law school, although one of my problems during law school is I probably spent less time here than I should have, because working was a lot more fun. But you do have to pay attention to what's going on outside.
And on the litigation side, I was the founding co-chair of the sexual litigation's counterpart to Michael's. The sexual litigation has a privacy and data security committee with similar materials with a litigation focus. And Carol mentioned the Sedona conference earlier. The Sedona conference, its newest working group 11, is focused on data security. And the materials are still a work in progress, but we're working on getting those updated. So those are all excellent resources. If you're looking to get just the background information or keep up on the developments, there's a constant stream of these publications with different focuses.
One thing I just wanted to mention to complement that is, so, everyone's been speaking about what you do now, where the information is, and pay attention to that. Also pay attention to, if you want to practice in this field, because I want to segue off something Michael said, which is very important, that you have to have a couple of horses in the barn to survive in your law practice, right? Almost all of us have said, even except I'll probably step out to say that I probably do more data breach just because I'm at such a large law firm and we're in so many different cities. And you need to focus on what that means for what I just said. If you want to stay available, you're going to have to be with a large firm, right, that has offices everywhere. I'm just blessed that I've been doing this for so long, is that actually other law firms, I have 20% of my practice is other law firms hiring me, which is something I can say publicly here. Can't disclose who they are, but all across the United States to supplement and serve as co-counsel. So I needed to explain, how does someone with only a Michigan license survive all around the United States and then some occasionally in Europe, is that I'm being hired by other law firms to support them. So you have to be at a firm that has the spotlight will shift when these issues arise, and then they'll look within that law firm. And of course, after 10, 12 years of practice, pretty soon people get to know who you are, and they'll find you anyways. But I just wanted to leave you with that thought, is that if you want to practice and thrive, you cannot hang out a shingle by yourself in the corner here and say you're a data, security attorney. You won't eat. You won't be ready.
Do you mind if I just real quickly ask, because I saw a lot of blank faces, how many of you are familiar that you can now, A, you can join sections of the state bar, and B, how many of you are even familiar with that is? Okay, so just a few of you. So just to back up, because I, as a student, had no idea, and I really regret not being able to join when I was a student. The state bar has all these different breakout sections on either, a collection of lawyers that, are interested in certain things. I mentioned at the beginning that I'm part of the arts, communication, entertainment, and sports section of the bar. So a lot of the work that I do deals with intellectual property, so I kind of naturally gravitated towards that. As law students, and I want to say first year students, I think a lot of the sections are free for you. So join all of them. You can do it now. You just join them all, be on the newsletter, and when you find oh, that sounds really fascinating. You don't have to go to the meetings, go to the meetings. I've met some really great people through these meetings. I've met a lot of networks, and they've helped me develop my career. So please, 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 and just look on the State Bar website for a little bit more information on that. But I was like, did they know what we're talking about?
I'm a little bit prejudiced, because when I was a student here, I was the ABA law student division rep. So I would actually go around to students and say, there's some real value here. You can get this stuff really cheap. Not only just the ABA journal, but some of the other things. My first committee meeting with the State Bar Business Law section was when I was a 3L there. Myself and one of the other students, we went to the State Bar annual meeting in Grand Rapids. That's a great place to meet people. If anybody starts telling you, oh, all these old lawyers, they don't want to talk to us young people, nonsense. Everybody looks at anybody who's coming in the door as saying, oh, you're interested. Oh, tell us why. Let's talk to you about this. Oh, is this? You can get involved in a lot of different things. Or you could just lurk, and see what's going on. Well, there's a lot of benefit to lurking, I assure you.
So I'm hearing here, I think, two big things about succeeding in this field, or two big requisites for succeeding in this field. One of them is actually having basic knowledge and expertise in what the internet is, how it works, and about developments in the internet law space. And the other is putting yourself in a position where you can leverage that knowledge and expertise by being out there, knowing people, participating in the sections, being in a position to get that work. On the first point, I've got a war story of my own, which is just that way back in the day, in 97, 98, I took a year off from this job, and I went to work for the Federal Communications Commission. As a result of which, I found myself involved in some really amazing high-level discussions about the government's internet law policy, not because of any great virtue of my own, but only because there was almost nobody in the federal government at that time who actually knew anything about the internet. And if you knew anything at all, you were a valuable commodity. But that's not now. That was 18, 19 years ago. But something about folks right now is that learning about this field and developing expertise in this field is not actually that hard. Which is to say, sure, it's hard, everything's hard. But it's not rocket science. No one should say, oh my God, I can't find out about internet architecture because that's just too complicated for the little old me. These are things you can learn, and it provides a return. Let me ask another question for you guys, because on the one hand, the panel here is about the practice in data protection and cybersecurity, and we're seeing a lot of developments in this field. The EU certainly is bringing in a lot of new requirements and new regulatory dictates when it comes to data protection. We've now got the right to be forgotten growing out of European data protection law. Colin mentioned autonomous vehicles and the Internet of Things, and we've just learned fairly painfully that hackers can use your internet-connected toaster or your internet-connected thermostat or your internet-connected light bulbs as a vehicle for a distributed denial of service attack to sort of take down the internet. So this is a field that's developing, but let me ask you guys, in terms of finding and filling that gap, where is it going? What are going to be the hot issues for you guys or people like you guys 5 years from now?
I'll start on that. So within the U.S. infrastructure, there's been a movement to try to do comprehensive regulation of legislation. What has really been happening is that a couple of things have been trying to go through Congress to water down what's happened in data breach laws and privacy laws. But for the most part, I think we can probably expect that there won't be a lot of changes at the U.S. level in the near future. It could change, but what the biggest changes I'm seeing are from the EU. There's essentially a treaty agreement in place called Privacy Shield right now, which is a temporary agreement to be able to move data across. But starting in a year and 10 months or so, the general data protection regulation in the EU is going to start coming into effect. It is a large, comprehensive set of regulations and rules that covers all of the EU, which means that it covers a lot of people that deal with the EU. So you can't just be looking at the US or North America, although pay attention to the fact that Canada has much more restrictive legislation on privacy than the US does. But it has to be looked at as a worldwide approach to these issues. But the other thing that, if you're looking in the near term, that I think is going to be probably a growth area and maybe some opportunities, is if anybody's interested in the law enforcement side, the U.S. Attorney's Office in Detroit has a really good group. They actually used to have one of the best people in the U.S. Dealing with cybersecurity issues, but he's now a federal judge. He's so well respected that George Bush nominated him as the U.S. Attorney, and Barack Obama nominated him as a federal judge. So he's Terry Berg, but he's a person that was really well respected. But the U.S. Attorney's Office is taking the lead. There's a real close relationship with the local office of the FBI and with the state police organization. I actually wore this pin to remind me to talk about law enforcement. This is for InfraGuard, which is an FBI-sponsored organization that has a lot of techie geeks, but also a lot of law enforcement folks and very few lawyers, which is why I like going there. I'm on the Michigan board just to make sure everybody understands that. But the law enforcement side is an approach that is another entree, but probably we'll be seeing more of that than as a growth area in the next few years. You'll see it from the FBI, you'll see it from big on the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, which is essentially taking it on themselves to say, okay, Congress isn't going to do something about it, so we're going to bend some legislation to say that we have the right to pursue this, which I think they do. But those are some of the areas. You won't see much on the local side. The last local AG, or Michigan AG that had any interest in doing this was Jennifer Granholm when she was the AG. And then once the following AGs came, Attorney Generals came in, they weren't really interested unless it had to do with child porn. So on the business side, you're really looking at the federal level. But it's an interesting entree to this area.
Yeah, I wanted to supplement, Mike, you did a great introduction on the, policy, now the practical. I just wanted to put a bump to the practical side, which is, if you did say the word, you could also consider joining one of the service agencies. I know my prior firm hired a lot of ex-agents who were lawyers, and they went on to have rather successful legal careers. I would also include, because I do so much payment card industry, data credit card breach work, that I work with a lot of Secret Service agents, and especially in our area, the Great Lakes area, I really recommend maybe entertain a couple of years. Think of that as a very thoughtful approach to a residency. We don't have them in the legal field, they do in medical fields, but I have certainly seen nothing but success happen for lawyers who go into one of the agencies for a period of years and then transition into practice. General Motors, I know, hires a lot of ex-agents who are attorneys. And then on the practical side, especially if you're interested in this, there is a great need. Sometimes I see, things are still kind of slow on the data knowledge of our agents. In our area, I'm finding that for credit card breaches, the Secret Service is getting more actively involved, kind of drawing away from the FBI. Of course, some would say in the Constitution, the Secret Service was always supposed to be involved with the Treasury, and so now I guess they're taking it seriously. But then the FTC was a little late coming to the web rescue, either on that form of communication. But things to consider is that for I feel like it's quite radical, but it's something to think about. A couple of years there makes you very attractive to the Fortune 100 and all the major law firms across the U.S. But I did want to make a comment about what does it mean to practice, and what may happen in the future, and what do I think is going to happen. And I guess, you know, since I started the gap discussion, and it is on my law school application, and it's still there, and I'm old now, getting ready to plan retirement, is that what I did last week, you know, I was in some strange state again, and the IT person waits until my arrival to tell the entire executives that 2 ports, you know, were left open for a period of 12 years in a major corporation.
And if you don't know what that means, then you can't be practicing in this area.
Yeah, because I was
If
the
you
only one.
don't know what that means, you need to learn
Yes.
before you can practice in this
Yeah.
area.
But can you imagine, that just happened.
But you can do that.
So where is this all going? I'm the only one that fainted in the room. And then I finally, you learn the art of diplomacy. I stutter a lot sometimes during these episodes. And I asked the CEO to step out in the hallway with me so we could chat for a little bit, you know, about what this might mean and how it changed the whole scope of the engagement and the analysis. Can you imagine the engineers I had to retain, because I do it for privilege, so getting into actual practice things, to figure out what the heck has been going on for the last decade in this corporation. And then, of course, the privilege I'm going to get is to fire the IT person. And I always close a lot of speeches with that, and I fire the IT on my way out, because they figure I don't live there, they never want to see me again, I get treated like a divorce attorney. It's like, thank you, this was a good job, get the hell out of here. Yeah.
I'm gonna cut in here
Yeah.
because we're gonna
Yeah.
hit the end of our hour, and I don't want to monopolize the entire time for Q&A, because I know you guys have questions, so I'd like you to direct your questions to the panel, or if you don't have questions, we'll just give you. Yeah.
Have you seen a change in the implementation of best practices since like Home Depot or like Wyndham Hotels? Like, do companies actually go about, and are they more serious about actually implementing these practices?
Yeah, there's a survey that was just done of the members of the boards of directors of the Fortune 500 of what are the biggest issues facing their companies, and 2/3 of the responses identified cybersecurity as a big issue. So, yeah, best practices in cybersecurity didn't exist not too long ago, but they're really working on that. Most of the companies, though, don't give enough budget to the people that are working in this area. That's why it has to be at the board level being pushed out.
Also, it's at the board level because the directors are liable if they don't adequately educate themselves and ensure that it's being done. It's a disclosure issue if you're a public company. So there are incentives to taking some sort of steps in the right direction.
And there's good reading material, so I break this down. The Honigman Institute has Tone at the top, talks about responsibility and how it's trying to encourage, so that's a good free PDF.
Write this down as you write it, P-O-N-E-M-O-N, Honigman Institute. They're actually in Traverse City, right on the main street, but they're a nationally recognized institute. It's a think tank, lots of materials. P-O-N-E-M-O-N, Honigman.
Would you say that the fear actually motivates them? Just because I know that the derivative suits for like Wyndham Hotels, that was just dismissed. So would you say that's a motivating factor, or is that something that's kind of to think about but hasn't really brought about change?
I think that it is a motivating factor. I think they also know that they need to do it. It's, even if you don't get sued as a director, if your company is above the fold in the Wall Street Journal because you had a data breach, it is not going to end well. I mean, the expense of, forget who gets involved from the government. The professionals you have to hire, the IT infrastructure you're going to have to now completely come in, reanalyze, rebuild, fire all the IT people, hire new IT people, evaluate that, and then convince your shareholders that you've done this adequately. And then the most important piece, convince your customers to trust you again with their data. If I can't trust you to keep my name and email private? Why would I trust you with financial information? Why would I go to Home Depot instead of Lowe's if I can get the same box of drywall screws and Home Depot can't keep things locked down? That's the risk, is that customers find alternatives. And so, you know, you've got a lot of different things there, but I don't think they're sitting there saying, I'm off the hook on a derivative suit, therefore I'm not gonna worry about it. There's a lot about keeping the business going the way you want it to go that feeds into those.
So,
You were first.
okay, well, I have two questions, one kind of international scope, one with a more domestic scope. So in the international question, there's been a lot of talks between cyber attacks from different countries and whatnot. So if, for instance, if there was a cyber attack from a foreign country, is there an actual remedy that a US company can get from it right now, or is this just kind of, you can't do anything about it?
Good luck tracing it. Finding out who did it.
We recognize that things like the distributed denial of service attacks, or the hacking attacks, it used to be for hackers that used to like just disrupt things, or groups like Anonymous that would do it for political purposes. Almost all right now is economic espionage. People are looking to get data, people are looking to get information at that level, at the level of payment card industry, or those kinds of things. They're looking to get credentials, social security number, credit card number, names, so that they could reproduce those. Carol mentioned the Secret Service. Most people find out about a breach in their payment card system when the Secret Service comes and says, you have a problem. And because they will have no idea for the most part. It's usually when the Secret Service comes. Because the Secret Service goes out on the black market and starts buying up credit card information and then tries to piece together where it would have come from. But there's no international treaty. There's economic pressure that can be put on, but as an effective remedy, it's really hard.
No.
No.
My second question is, there's been a lot of talks about people saying that the government is trying to ban certain contents on the internet, such as porn, for example. What is the legality of that in the United States, and if that was, something like that was legal, what would be the enforceability of such legislation?
You so need to take the internet law seminar.
I'll sign up.
I'm gonna pass over that one because we're almost out of time and hit on Norm for the last question.
So you guys talked a lot about front end, back end, and like cybersecurity, which people see as a big issue, but I think the other side of that coin is that the use of data is a big opportunity. So I guess what role do we play as far as the use of the data or acquiring third parties to aggregate data for us, moving forward? Because I'm assuming that all service industries, manufacturing, probably even lawyers, to a particular extent, are collecting data on their own. Do we play a role in how that data is used? If so, I guess what are your experiences in that?
Yeah, absolutely. This is collection of data in the terms of service. You'll see on certain websites now, you have impliedly consented to their collection of data and their use of cookies by your continued use of the website, right? That goes back to the EU. But all of this data that's being collected, you need to make sure you have your terms of service out there, your terms of use, you have policies in place, and then you need to comply with the policies. Where I'm seeing problems are people saying on their website, we're gonna do X, Y, Z with the data we collect. And then no one tells that to the business people, and they sell that data list to someone else, and now you have a class action on your hands, or you have a inquiring law enforcement agency. But data is incredibly powerful. This isn't just negative and responding to problems. This is you're on the security side of one of the most powerful tools we've seen from a business perspective. Knowing information about your customer that allows you to make decisions about how to target ads, not to a geographic area on TV, but to me. When I go and I get the ad for the hotel that I looked at on my cell phone, I get it on my laptop when I look at it because Google knows it's me, they know I search for it. It's an incredibly powerful tool. And lawyers are involved in all aspects of how to collect it, use it, and keep it safe.
One other aspect, and it really is a dual kind of thing. So technological development has an impact for the most part. So take connected vehicles or Internet of Things. All of that was being developed without the thought of privacy and security. So for the people that are looking at this, including people on the legal side, the concept of privacy by design and security by design is a very, very important tool. And that's one of the things that people can play a role in. If where you're approaching new development and you build in issues related to privacy and issues related to security and how that all works up front so that you're not trying to correct it after the fact, then you can be a lot more proactive. And that's where a lot of us would love to be able to be at the front end as opposed to getting a call and say we have a problem.
Right,
Yeah.
and data
Amen to that.
aggregation. Yeah, data aggregation is probably one of my #1 data breach costs. And there's no regulations about how they house that data. And when I think of, we have right down the street, Mr. Peter Carmanos bought a great patent from Cohn, he used to be the general counsel of Federated Identity Management. I spoke in Coble Hall about it a couple years ago. And
Nobody knew what she was talking
yeah,
about.
it's true. And unfortunately, that is what is needed. You know, so it's so hard to know that this technology exists. It was built for the integrated platform for the car companies across the world, actually. But that entity did not survive. Mr. Carmanos used it. He sold it immediately. He did health exchanges. Yeah, the automotive airplane communications are using it. It's so secure, but we're not using it for our integrated data and our data accumulation.
For our final 2 minutes in this hour, I want to invite you guys, but especially Colin and Shivangee, who have been a little quieter, just to share any final thoughts you have before we need to break up, because I know some of you have to be in class in 10 minutes, and I know that because I'm going to be at the front of the room teaching. Any final thoughts?
Dive in, the water's comfortable, there's a lot of room for growth in this area. I think it's exciting, I think it's going to continue to be. There's a good opportunity to learn a lot, have a good time doing it, and it can be fairly lucrative as well. So I think that checks off a lot of boxes for me, it has, and I invite you to look into it and consider that for yourself.
You know, I'll just say that one of the opportunities that you guys have now is that you have a seminar, you have the ability to learn about this stuff at the outset and dive in right away, which a lot of people didn't have. And so everyone here has kind of, I know I've shoehorned myself into at the very fringes, and I'm saying like, you know, they're downtown and I'm like way out in the suburbs of data privacy, but you have the opportunity to really dive in a meaningful way. So take those opportunities as they come along. Wayne has been really good for me, and I know it's going to be great for you guys too.
So thank you to the panel. You're wonderful.